Well, it is with much joy that we join you here on this Shabbat evening. Shabbat Shalom. I end all of my services at First Baptist by saying, I'm glad that I came and I hope you feel the same. Well, I think I speak for all First Baptist folk here. We are glad that we came. And I will do my best not to mess that up, but to continue that good feeling of community and fellowship as we draw here together. We are here together, and we have gathered here together in the dark, after dark. Now, I know enough about the Jewish Sabbath to know that's sort of the point, on Friday at least. But you know, being as the seasons have changed and we have discontinued daylight savings time, we're in the dark sure enough, right? I mean, it's good and dark out there. And how do you feel about that? About the lessening of the daylight, the encroaching of the darkness? Of course, many times when we speak about ourselves being in the dark, we're not speaking about anything about daylight savings time. We're talking metaphorically about the fact that the forces of darkness, poverty, injustice, hatred, violence, fear, depression, can also be rather rampant in our world. As we sung a few minutes ago, not everybody's free yet, right? And so it can feel like those forces are sort of in ascendancy in our life. Indeed, as we just turn on the television set, it can be easy to succumb to hopelessness in the face of such darkness if it were not for faith. If it were not for the belief that something, God, family, community, peace, justice, love, mercy, compassion, shalom was not still at work in this world. And so what do we as people of faith do in the midst of such darkness but light a candle? Dare to be a beacon of light, even in the midst of darkness. And yet that's not an easy thing to do now, is it? So how are we to do that exactly? Well, in the 3rd chapter of 1 Samuel, we have the story of the call of Samuel to be a prophet, to be a minister of hope, to be a candle of light, if you will. And that call comes in the dark. But that setting of that story in the dark is just not a reality of the time of day in which it happens. It's symbolic because the text goes on to say that the word of the Lord was rare in those days, that visions were seldom, and that even the vision of the priest Eli there in the tabernacle at Shiloh was beginning to fade. So you see, that story is not just about one that happens in the dark. It was happening in the midst of dark and troublesome times for the people of Israel. And yet God still speaks in and through and to the people that dwell in the midst of that darkness. That darkness doesn't stop the voice of God. The story does happen at night. Eli and Samuel are asleep in different quarters within the tabernacle itself when the voice of the Lord comes to Samuel. Shemuel. Shemuel. That's sort of how I've imagined it. Sort of like a whisper going down a canyon. Shemuel. And you can imagine Samuel as that little boy hearing that startling voice in the midst of pitch black darkness, sitting up in bed, and in some sense of fright, running down the corridor to the dwelling place of Eli, the only voice that he knows dwells in that tabernacle. And they're saying to the old priest Eli, "Hineni, here I am." You called? And Eli groggily saying, I didn't call you, Samuel. Go back to bed. So Samuel goes back to bed. But sure enough, that voice comes back, Shemuel. So Samuel gets up yet once again, and he rushes into Eli and saying, Hineni, here I am. You called. And this time, with a little bit of disgust, I'm imagining, Eli says, I didn't call you, my son. Go back to bed. There are some parents in this room right now who are reliving last night. Are you not? I mean, I feel you. I've been there. And so Samuel goes back to bed. But sure enough, the voice comes again. So Samuel comes running yet once again. And Eli is just about to send Samuel back to bed for the fourth time. But this time, his wits are a little more about him. He's a little more awake. And a thought occurs to him. You don't think. No, it couldn't be. But maybe. So this time as he sends Samuel to bed, he says, Samuel, if the voice calls your name yet once again, don't come running to me. Just sit up and say, speak, Lord, for your servant is listening. So sure enough, Samuel hears his name yet once again. And so he does as Eli has instructed him to do. He simply sits up and says, speak, Lord. And the Lord speaks. And the Lord continues to speak to Samuel. Not just on that night, but throughout all the days and nights of his life. And in so doing, enables him to be the prophet of God. To be the bearer of light that sees the children of Israel from the time of the judges into the time of the king. What a life. What a ministry. What a story. And it begins in darkness. When a child dares to hear the voice of God call him. And I think it's a story that has much to say about us as we dare to hear the voice of the Lord, as we dare to see and discern and follow the light of God, even in what is still some fairly dark times. First off, I think this story reminds us that we need to follow the light we have. I mean, at the beginning of this story, there isn't much light there. Samuel has not yet seen the light. The text says he has not yet heard the voice of the Lord. And Eli, well, his light and ability to see light was fading and fading fast. But even there, amidst the blindness, the ignorance, the confusion, Eli and Samuel are already serving God. Did you notice that? Samuel discovers God in the midst of serving God. I find that highly instructive and comforting. To know that I don't have to understand everything about God, let alone understand everything that God is up to before I get on with the business of serving God. And it might just be that in following the light I have, that might lead me to the light that I need. You know, I was in a worship service one time when a minister came down off the podium and asked a good friend of mine, what is God doing in your life? And then stuck the microphone in the face of my friend. And my friend sort of stuttered for a second, as most of us might, and said, well, you know, I'm a sophomore in college. I've got to declare my major. So I'm sort of praying and seeking what God would have me do with my life. And so the minister said, do you have a Bible? And my friend said, yes. And the minister said, let me see it. And the minister took the scriptures and he opened it up to a Christian scripture that reads sort of like a list of all of the things we are to do as children of God. Feed the hungry, shelter the homeless, clothe the naked, care for the poor, heal the sick, etc., etc., etc. And then he closed the Bible, handed it back to my friend, and said, "There, do you think that'll keep you busy for a while?" And then he went on to the next person. Now, on the one hand, what a jerk. I mean, really, my friend was just offering a very honest answer to a rather difficult question. He had put my friend on the spot. But on the other hand, what a point. I mean, most of the time, what that minister had to say and suggest is exactly right. Stop floundering. Stop worrying about the light that you do not see, the voice that you do not hear, and get on with following the voice that you know, with following the light that you do see. And in so doing, it might just lead you to the light that you need. But you know, the story also reminds us that as we are doing that, to not get lost in doing that. To not lose ourselves in following the light that we know and that we have already received, to the point that we are not open to receive new light, new insight, a new word from the Lord that might guide us and direct us even further in our journey. Hineni. Did you hear that precious little response from Samuel? I mean, it sounds like the response of a boy, a young child. You've heard that. You've seen it before. It's that little child in the back of the class raising their hand. Ooh, pick me. Pick me, teacher. I know the answer. Ooh, here I am. Here I am. What a glorious, powerful acclamation. Here I am. I'm open. I'm ready. I'm willing. Call me. Pick me. Choose me. And yet, you know, when God does come to us with new light many times, light of communion, comfort, but especially challenge, we don't tend to respond to God by saying, "Here I am." We tend to respond and say, "There he is. There she is. Now, really, God, I'm honored that you ask and all, but you know, Sally would be much better at that. I mean, Tom's got that gift. He can do that spot on. He's your man." But you know, here we have in this text a child, as is so often the case, who leads us, who teaches us and reminds us once again of one of the great spiritual principles of all time. That our response to God and God's light in our life should be, "Here I am. Here I am." I'm not going to get involved, God, in what you have to do with other people, with what you have to tell them and what they should be doing. But as for me and my house, here I am. Use me. Do something with me. And you know, if we in this room, if we just in this room dare to put into practice those two principles of following the light that we know, while at the same time being open to the new light of God's love and mercy and justice that God has yet to teach us, we could turn this town upside down. We could. And we don't even need all the other people from Temple Israel and First Baptist. It's just these people. Just us right here. Because you know, the funny thing about light and darkness is that it doesn't take much light to dispel the darkness. Even in the darkest, deepest, dankest caverns in pitch black darkness. All it takes is one person to light a candle, or turn on a flashlight, or turn on your cell phone. And you know, if that first person who lights a candle dares to pass it to someone else and their candle, and those 2 pass it to 4, and those 4 pass it to 8, and those 8 pass it to 16 and 32, right? Before too long, the entire place is illuminated. Not just for the people who have candles, but for everybody in the room. Do you believe that? Do you believe that is indeed possible by the grace and mercy and power of God? I do. That's why I'm here tonight. But what's more important, I believe that's what God believes about the potential that lies within you and within me, and especially if we would come together and be the children of light that God means for us to be. Thanks be to God.